Those are your demons, and they still lure you in. They draw awareness in. They go, come here. Let's worry. It's a trap. It's an illusion. You can think of it as a demon. It draws you in, and you like to worry. You have sort of a pessimistic view of the future, and you're drawn to that. Something in you is drawn to that. Yeah. And then it hooks you. Beyond worry, you have to remember that worry, beyond the conclusion of worry, there's a much more territory for seeing, for observing, for perceiving. I've talked about this too before with negative emotions. You think you're walking out in this field and you're kind of seeing how things are, and you reach the boundary that's called worry. And you think, well, that's it. That's as far. And now I'm just worried. Things are bad. There's more to see beyond worry. And it is seeing things as they actually are and not being identified with them. We keep identifying. We keep thinking, I need to be identified with all this. You don't. You can pull back from the identification and try to understand you do not have to rely on the lens of worry. And you do not have to believe that it's true. It's a negative filter, but it's not the full truth. What you want to do is see the full truth. And when you do, there will be no more room for worry. Worry is not a good tool to have in your toolbox. And you are negatively charged type. And there's nothing wrong with that. So your outlook will always tend toward that. But your consciousness can see that. Your consciousness does not need to be encumbered by that. It can start to step out. And when it does, when there's less identification, things like worry won't have such a foothold in you. It's not essence. Essence doesn't really worry. Essence can feel a little defeated, but it doesn't go into this psychological loop of worrying. That's a personality phenomenon of the ego. And then we chew on it. It's like chewing gum. We keep putting that same gum in our mouth. We're chewing on worry.
Exactly.
And we have to sort of give up that chewing gum. And that's why I say you can look beyond worry and see things as they are. You want to remember, don't be that. It's going to happen. That's how your mind turns. You're built that way. But don't become that. Don't become the sense of identity in relation to that. See it. Just notice it. If you could unlock all of that, if you could untie all those knots, you would see that you're doing it to yourself. But this is hard for people to do, and the reason is people don't want to give up their problems because to do so they have to give up their idea of themselves. And that's what you have to see ultimately. It's almost as though someone's sitting next to you there in the room, just kind of shaking its head like he still doesn't get it. But it's not, that's not quite the way it really is. But you can begin to see yourself more and more from a distance, impartially. This is what's important. Sometimes these questions are so big, and it's good to recognize we don't know the full answer. And we don't need to know. And as I said earlier, how can we use these ideas and this way of thinking to be less identified rather than becoming more identified? Because that's what happens. Something happens in the world, we don't like it, and that becomes reason for us to become now more identified. You see this in politics. Everybody has an opinion, and I'm now going to hold to my opinion, and I'm going to become more identified because that's going to help. I think that's going to help. It never helps. Epictetus was a slave. He transformed his suffering. His master broke his arm, snapped it in two, made him do all the things he didn't want to do. He's like the master of attitudes, the master of turning thinking around in his favor. And he said, it's not what happens to you, it's your attitude about it that makes you the master of yourself. There's a beautiful quote from him: seek not to have events happen as you choose. Rather choose to have them happen as they do, and so shall you live prosperously. Suppose you could park all of your worry to the side, and now you are just watching things happen as they do. Seek not to have things happen as you choose, rather choose to have them happen as they do. We think we can control things. We think we can control these big events, like political upheaval that's happening all over the world now. It really is happening. It's hard to accept it. And there's another famous saying about presence, awareness, seeing things objectively. Walt Whitman, the American poet, he wrote a beautiful line. He said, "Now the profound lesson of reception, neither preference nor denial. Do not prefer things to be a certain way and do not reject them. Do not deny what happens. The profound lesson of reception, receiving things as they are, as Epictetus said, choosing for them to happen as they do." This is very powerful, because what does that mean? You're now fostering an attitude that's going to promote non-identification. Consciousness is then going to be able to distill out of the mind. See, all of this is in the mind, our attitude about it. We think it shouldn't be this way. This should not be happening.
Yes.
It need not happen this way. And people are hypnotized and they need to get their act together. No, people are asleep. Their consciousness is stuck in the feeling of identity as a person. They're invested in themselves as a person. Their person has preferences and ideals and opinions and points of view and refuses to let them go. And this is true of most of humanity. And if you can manage to get out of that in yourself, that's what's called, the fourth way calls escaping. Waking up, you're now escaping identification with identity. When your feeling of I disintegrates, falls apart, is killed, dies, however you want to think of it, then all that energy that was locked up in it is freed to awareness itself. And now awareness is more aware, more conscious, more recognizing itself as the seeing of all this. That's a beautiful thing. That's a wonderful thing. And but the other thing is, you see that what died was just an illusion. It didn't actually exist.